Ambassador Taemin Park sat in the back row of the Galactic Council chambers, watching the other species argue about the Void Gate project. The massive room buzzed with the sounds of 100 different languages being translated through neural implants. Floating above the center stage, a hologram showed the proposed gateway that would let ships travel beyond the edge of their galaxy. Taemin had been Earth's ambassador for 12 years. In that time, he had learned to keep his face calm, even when the other council members treated humans like children. Today felt different, though. Today, they were not just ignoring humanity, they were actively pushing them away from something. Humans had helped create. Dr. Hyojin Kim shifted in her seat next to him. She held a data tablet containing her research on quantum tunneling, the very technology that made the Void Gate possible. 3 years of work that could change everything. But the Council had refused to even look at it. The Void Gate project will proceed without the younger species, announced Counselor Zethkar, his reptilian features twisted in what humans had learned was a sneer. The Zeltharan spoke as if humans were not even in the room. This undertaking requires wisdom that comes only with age. Some species simply lack the mental capacity for such advanced work. Murmurs of agreement came from the other ancient species. The Corvins, with their crystal bodies that rang like bells when they moved. The Etherians, floating in their containment, suits filled with exotic gases. The Nexari, whose multiple heads nodded in unison. All of them had been traveling the stars for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. Taemin raised his hand to request speaking time. The gesture was ignored. Captain Dong-Woo Lee, sitting in the military section, kept his expression neutral. But Taemin noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. Dong-Woo commanded Earth's small fleet of 12 ships, barely a footnote. Compared to the thousands that other species fielded, the Council treated those ships like toys. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Velnara of the Corvins, her crystal voice ringing through the chamber, our human friends could assist with mining operations in the outer systems. Such work would be more appropriate to their current abilities. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not cruel laughter, but the kind adults make when a child asks to help with grown-up work. Somehow, that made it worse. Dr. Kim's knuckles were white where she gripped her tablet. Her void manipulation research could solve the stability problems that had killed dozens of researchers in the project's early tests. But when she had tried to share her findings, she was told that human science was interesting but premature. Taemin tried again to get recognition from the chamber speaker. Again, he was ignored. The Void Gate will open new worlds for the worthy species, continued Zethkar. We cannot risk such important work on unproven technologies from unproven peoples. Humans will be assigned to provide logistical support. Food preparation, equipment transport, basic maintenance, tasks suitable to their understanding. More nods around the chamber. The decision was already made. It had probably been made before the meeting even started. This was just theater, a way to make the younger species feel included, while keeping them firmly in their place. Taemin stood up slowly. The movement drew some attention, but not from the speaker's platform. A few nearby delegates glanced at him with mild curiosity. For a moment, he considered making a speech. He could talk about human achievements in quantum physics. He could mention how human researchers had solved problems that stumped species with 10 times their experience. He could point out that Dr. Kim's work had already saved lives in the colony systems. Instead, he said nothing. Taemin gave a single respectful nod toward the speaker's platform. Then he walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet that followed. A few council members looked up from their discussions, mildly puzzled by the interruption. Dr. Kim watched him for a moment, then closed her tablet and followed. Her research went with her. 3 years of breakthroughs that could have changed everything. Captain Lee stood next, his military bearing making his movement seem like a formal withdrawal. One by one, every human in the chamber filed out behind their ambassador. They did not slam doors. They did not make angry declarations. They did not threaten or demand or plead. They simply left. In the hallway outside, Taemin finally spoke. "Send the recall signal," he told Captain Lee quietly. "All ships, sir. All ships. All stations. All colonies in Council space. We're going home." Within an hour, human vessels throughout the galaxy began moving. Trade ships left markets where they were buying and selling. Research stations shut down their experiments and packed their equipment. Military ships abandoned their patrol routes and formed up into departure formations. The exodus was orderly and complete. Humans had never been a large presence in Council space, but their absence became noticeable quickly. Cargo deliveries stopped arriving. Scientific conferences lost their most innovative speakers. Several space stations found themselves without the maintenance crews they had come to depend on. Back in the council chambers, the debate continued for another 3 hours. When it ended, Councillor Zethkar was pleased with the result. The Void Gate project would be handled by Sirius species as it should be. "Where did the humans go?" asked a junior aide as the chamber emptied. Zethkar waved a dismissive claw. "Home to sulk, no doubt. They will return within a month, begging for readmission. The young always think they can manage alone until reality teaches them otherwise." Other council members agreed. Humans needed the galaxy more than the galaxy needed humans. Their home system was small and resource-poor compared to the vast territories controlled by the elder species. Without access to council trade routes and technology exchanges, humanity would quickly realize their mistake. Files were prepared to redistribute human territories among more deserving species. The Corvins expressed interest in the mining rights humans had developed in the Kepler cluster. The Nexari wanted the agricultural worlds humans had been terraforming. Everything would work out for the best, the Council agreed. The galaxy would continue as it always had, guided by the wisdom of ancient species who knew better than to trust important work to children playing with forces beyond their understanding. None of them wondered why humans had seemed so calm as they left. None of them questioned why a species would abandon everything they had built without putting up any fight at all. They would learn the answers to those questions, but not for many years. By then, it would be far too late to matter. Director Bo-Ra Choi stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching the latest group of colony ships prepare for departure. Below her, the massive orbital facility hummed with activity as thousands of workers loaded supplies and equipment. The ships themselves were unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever seen, sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their hulls. 33 years had passed since humanity left Council space. 33 years of working alone, building something new. "The Tau Ceti convoy is ready for departure," reported Engineer Jiho Nam over the communication system. His voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a particularly difficult puzzle. "The new drive systems are operating within normal parameters." Bo-Ra smiled. Normal parameters for humanity now included technologies that the Council still considered impossible. The ships waiting below her did not travel through space in the traditional sense. Instead, they slipped between the layers of reality itself, moving through what human scientists called fold space. A journey that took other species months could be completed by humans in days. The breakthrough had come from Dr. Soo-Jin Yoon, who had taken over Dr. Kim's research after the older woman retired. Where the Council had seen dangerous theories, Soo-Jin saw practical applications. Her work on void manipulation had led to defensive systems that made human territory nearly impenetrable, and transportation methods that opened up entire new regions of the galaxy. "Director," called a technician from the communications station. "We're receiving another signal from Council space, same frequency as the others." Bo-Ra nodded but did not move to listen. The Council had been trying to contact humanity for 5 years now, ever since their Void Gate project ran into serious problems. The messages started polite, then became urgent, and recently had taken on a tone that might have been desperation. She knew what the messages contained without listening. The Council's grand project was failing. Without human quantum technology, they had suffered 3 major disasters that destroyed entire research facilities. The gate itself was unstable, creating random tears in space that led nowhere good. "File it with the others," she told the technician. Through the observation window, she could see the colony ships engaging their drives. One moment they were solid, metal vessels hanging in space. The next they shimmered and faded from view like mirages. They were still there, but existing in a slightly different layer of reality where distance meant something else entirely. Bo-Ra remembered the early days after the Exodus, when humanity had to learn everything from scratch. Without access to Council infrastructure, they were forced to develop their own solutions to problems they had never faced alone. The results had surprised everyone, including humans themselves. Engineer Nam's breakthrough in defensive technology came from studying how energy behaved in fold space. His weapon systems did not fire projectiles or beams. They convinced hostile objects that they existed somewhere else. Ships that attacked human territory simply found themselves millions of kilometers away, with no memory of how they got there. Dr. Yoon's terraforming advances used similar principles. Instead of spending decades changing a planet's atmosphere, her teams created small pockets of fold space that contained ideal conditions. They then convinced reality that those conditions had always been there. Barren worlds became garden paradises in months instead of generations. The population growth had been remarkable, without the restrictions and regulations that the Council imposed on younger species. Humanity had expanded rapidly. Their new technologies made previously uninhabitable worlds comfortable and safe. Families that had been limited to single children by resource constraints could now raise as many as they wanted. "Ma'am," the communications technician called again. "This new signal is different. It's marked as emergency priority, and it's coming from multiple Council worlds simultaneously." Bo-Ra finally moved to listen. The message was short and to the point. Something was coming through the void rifts that the failed Gate project had created. Something hostile that Council fleets could not fight. She studied the tactical data that accompanied the message. The enemy, called Devourers in the Council reports, seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Traditional weapons passed through them harmlessly. They consumed not just matter and energy, but the fundamental forces that held reality together. Entire star systems were going dark as these entities unraveled the fabric of space-time itself. "How long ago was this sent?" she asked. 6 months, ma'am. Based on the timestamps, 3 major Council worlds have fallen since then, Bo-Ra processed. this information calmly. The entities described in the reports sounded familiar. Humanity had encountered similar beings during their early experiments with fold space technology. The creatures came from a universe where entropy moved backward, where the laws of physics ran in reverse. They were drawn to normal space like parasites seeking healthy tissue to infect. "Any word from our monitoring stations?" she asked. "Captain, Wu Sung Han reported unusual activity near the old council borders," replied another technician. "Large fleets moving away from the core worlds. Refugee ships by the look of them." Through the observation window, the last of the colony ships disappeared into fold space. They were heading for a cluster of planets in what used to be called unexplored territory. Humanity had mapped those regions years ago using probe ships that could slip between dimensions. The worlds there were rich and beautiful, completely untouched by galactic civilization. Bo-Ra made her decision with the same calm efficiency that had made her humanity's director of expansion. "Send a message to President Song. Tell her the council situation has escalated. The neighbors are having the problems we predicted." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "Also, inform Captain Han that he is authorized to monitor council refugee movements. If they request assistance for civilians, he may provide basic humanitarian aid, but no military support and no sharing of fold space technology." The technician nodded and began composing the message. Bo-Ra remained at the observation window, thinking about the path that had led them here. When humanity left council space, many of their own people had worried about isolation. How could they survive without the vast resources and knowledge of the galactic community? The answer, it turned out, was that they thrived. Freed from the limitations that the Council placed on younger species, humanity had grown beyond anything they could have achieved while following someone else's rules. The Council had treated humans like children who needed guidance and protection. In return, humanity had behaved like children, accepting what they were given and staying within the boundaries they were shown. Only after walking away did they discover what they could accomplish when no one was telling them what was impossible. Now the Council faced an enemy that their ancient wisdom could not defeat, an enemy that humanity had learned to handle years ago during their first cautious steps into fold space. The irony was not lost on Bo-Ra, though she felt no satisfaction in it. The coming disaster would kill billions of innocent beings whose only crime was being led by fools. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message from President Song. The response was brief and characteristic of humanity's new approach to galactic affairs. "Understood. Maintain current policies, monitor situation, protect our interests first." Bo-Ra smiled at the last line. Protecting human interests now meant something very different than it had during the Council years. Their interests included vast territories in multiple dimensions, trade routes that spanned realities, and colonies on worlds that existed in the spaces between normal space. They had walked away from a small corner of one galaxy and found an infinite multiverse waiting for them. Outside the observation window, space looked empty and peaceful. But Bo-Ra knew that human ships moved through those seemingly vacant regions constantly, invisible to conventional sensors as they traveled the paths between worlds. Humanity had not just survived their exile, they had become something greater than any single species in Council space. The only question now was whether they would choose to help their former neighbors or simply watch from the safety of their advanced civilization as the old order collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. High Counselor Vex Tari stared at the tactical display with growing despair. Red markers showed the advance of the Devourers across what had once been the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Each marker represented a star system that had simply stopped existing in any meaningful way. The reports from the front lines made no sense according to everything the Council knew about physics. The Devourers did not destroy planets. They unmade them. Matter lost its ability to hold together. Energy forgot how to flow. The fundamental forces that created reality simply stopped working in areas where the entities passed. Status report from the Zeltharan Home Fleet, called General Quindar from his position at the Military Coordination Station. His voice carried the strain of a commander who had watched too many battles end in impossible defeat. Admiral Seknoth reports that conventional weapons have no effect. The enemy phases through our ships and attacks the crew directly. Vextari nodded grimly. They had lost 17 major fleets in the past month, each one commanded by officers with centuries of experience. The Devourers seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to target. When Council ships did manage to hit them, the weapons simply passed through as if the targets were not entirely there. Worse, the entities appeared to learn from each encounter. Early attacks had been random and scattered. Now they moved with purpose, striking at key infrastructure points and military installations. They were not just destroying the Council's ability to fight back. They were systematically dismantling the foundations of galactic civilization. "Any word from the research teams?" Vextari asked without much hope. Dr. Yelandra, Chief Science Officer of the Council, shook her crystalline head. "We have analyzed the quantum signatures of the Devourer attacks, but our understanding is insufficient. They appear to manipulate space-time in ways that our current physics cannot explain. We would need decades of research to develop countermeasures." "We do not have decades," General Quindar replied bluntly. "At their current rate of advance, they will reach the core worlds within 6 months." The command center fell into uncomfortable silence. Around them, staff officers continued their work with the mechanical efficiency of beings who knew their efforts were probably futile. Status reports flowed in from across Council space, each one worse than the last. The proud Zeltharans, who had ruled star systems for millennia, were evacuating their homeworld. The militaristic Corvins, whose fleets had never known defeat, were falling back to their innermost territories. The wise Etherians had simply vanished, their containment suits found empty in deep space with no sign of what had happened to their occupants. "High Counselor," called a communications officer, "we are receiving refugee reports from the border systems. Civilian populations are fleeing toward the Galactic Rim. Some are requesting permission to enter human space." Vexitari felt a bitter irony in that request. 34 years ago, the Council had dismissed humanity as too primitive to handle advanced technology. Now desperate refugees were seeking shelter in territory that humans controlled. Territory that, according to their intelligence reports, no longer seemed to exist. When humanity left Council space, they had simply vanished. Their former colonies were empty, their trading posts abandoned. Scout ships sent to investigate found worlds that showed signs of human habitation, but no humans. It was as if an entire species had simply faded away like a dream. "Have we had any success in contacting the humans?" Vextari asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, sir," replied the communications officer. "We have sent messages to every known human colony and outpost. No responses. Our long-range sensors detect no human ships or installations anywhere in their former territory." Captain Woo Sung Han, aboard his exploration vessel far from the conflict, watched another Council fleet flee past his position. The ships moved with the desperate speed of beings running for their lives, their formation broken and their weapons powered down to save energy for faster travel. Han's ship remained invisible to their sensors, existing in a layer of fold space that conventional technology could not detect. He had been monitoring Council space for months, documenting the advance of the entities that humans called void spawn. The creatures were exactly what humanity's scientists had predicted would, eventually, emerge from the unstable rifts created by the failed Void Gate project. "Relay to command," Han spoke into his communication system. "Refugee fleet designation Kappa 7 has passed our position. Approximately 40,000 civilians aboard 17 ships. They appear to be headed for the Epsilon sector." The response came back within seconds, transmitted through fold space channels that covered the distance instantly. "Acknowledged. Continue monitoring. Do not engage unless civilians are in immediate danger." Han nodded and settled back to watch. It was painful to see the Council's civilization collapsing, but humanity had tried to warn them. Dr. Kim's research had specifically identified the dangers of unstable void manipulation. The Council had dismissed those warnings along with everything else humans had to offer. Back in the Council Command Center, Vextari made a decision that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Prepare a formal request for assistance. Include everything we know about the Devourer threat and our current tactical situation. "To whom, sir?" asked the communications officer. "To humanity. Broadcast it on all frequencies they ever used. Include emergency codes from their time in the Council. Someone must be listening." Dr. Yelandra looked up from her research station. "High Counselor, even if we could contact them, what makes you think humans have developed weapons capable of fighting these entities? Their technology was decades behind ours when they left." Vexitari studied the tactical display again. The red markers had advanced another 3 light-years while they talked. At this rate, his own homeworld would be under attack within the month. "Because," he said quietly, "their quantum research was the only thing that made sense of what we were seeing in the void. Dr. Kim's theories about space-time manipulation were the only ones that explained the energy readings from our failed experiments. If anyone could have developed countermeasures to entities that exist partially outside normal space, it would be them." The admission tasted bitter. For centuries, the Council had assumed that age brought wisdom, that species who had traveled the stars longer necessarily understood them better. Humanity had been dismissed not because their ideas were wrong, but because they were young. Now, with their civilization dying around them, the Council was finally ready to admit that maybe, just maybe, they had made a mistake. General Quindar received another status report and shook his head grimly. "The Corvin's second fleet has gone silent. No response to communications, no sensor readings. Another 12,000 ships lost." "Send the message to humanity," Vexitari ordered. "Include our formal apology for past treatment and a request for immediate assistance. Offer them anything they want. Territory, resources, full Council membership with senior status." The communications officer began composing the message, but Vexitari doubted it would matter. If humans had wanted Council membership or territory, they would have fought for it 34 years ago instead of simply walking away. Whatever humanity had become during their time in isolation, it was clearly something that no longer needed anything the Council could offer. Hours passed without response. The tactical display continued its grim countdown as more systems fell to the advancing Devourers. Vextari found himself wondering if humanity even still existed, or if they had found some way to escape to regions beyond the Council's ability to detect or follow. Then, as he was reviewing casualty reports from the latest battles, the communications officer straightened in surprise. "High Counselor," the officer called, voice filled with an emotion that might have been hope. "We are receiving a transmission. The source appears to be a single ship at the edge of our sensor range." "Council. Fleet?" asked General Quindar. "No, sir. The quantum signature is unlike anything in our database. The message is simple. We are aware of your situation. Sending coordinates for a meeting." Vextari felt his breath catch. After 34 years of silence, someone had finally answered. Their call. Whether that someone was human, and whether they would be willing to help, remained to be seen. But for the first time since the Devourers appeared, the High Counselor allowed himself a small measure of hope. Admiral Inho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Council delegation's ships struggle to reach the meeting coordinates. Their vessels moved with the clumsy urgency of beings who had never learned to navigate fold space properly. What should have been a simple journey was taking them hours instead of minutes. Behind him, Dr. Yunji Bei monitored the readings from their dimensional sensors. "The Council ships are having trouble with the space-time distortions around our station," she reported calmly. "Should we provide navigation assistance?" "Let them work it out," Inho replied. "They need to understand what they're dealing with." Through the main view screen, the impossible sight of Nexus 7 gradually came into focus. The human megastructure surrounded the system's star like a crystalline flower, its petals extending into multiple dimensions simultaneously. Orbital cities housed billions of humans, while defensive platforms used technology that bent space itself into protective barriers. The Council delegation finally managed to dock with the station's reception area, their ships looking primitive and crude next to the elegant curves of human architecture. Inho watched their shuttles approach through corridors that existed in 7 different layers of reality at once. High Counselor Vextari emerged from the lead shuttle with the careful dignity of someone trying not to show how overwhelmed he was. His reptilian features were set in an expression of controlled desperation. Behind him came the surviving leadership of what had once been the galaxy's greatest civilization. Inho met them in a reception chamber that defied conventional physics. The room was larger inside than the space it occupied, with gravity that adjusted itself to each visitor's preference. Windows showed views of multiple star systems simultaneously, each one existing in a different dimensional layer. "Counselor Vextari," Inho said with polite formality. "Welcome to Nexus 7. I am Admiral SEO of the Human Federation. We understand. You are facing some difficulties." Vextari looked around the impossible chamber with barely concealed amazement. When humanity had left Council space, their most advanced technology had been basic fusion drives and simple quantum computers. Now they were casually manipulating the fundamental structure of reality itself. "Admiral Seo," Vextari began, swallowing his pride with visible effort. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request humanitarian assistance against the entities that are destroying our civilization." Dr. Bei stepped forward, her expression professionally neutral. "We have been monitoring the situation. The void spawn you call Devourers have been quite active. Your current military approach appears to be ineffective. Our weapons cannot harm them," admitted General Quindar, the Council's top military commander. "They exist partially outside normal space-time. Traditional projectiles and energy weapons pass through them harmlessly." "Yes," Dr. Bei said matter-of-factly. "They would." Void spawn exist in the spaces between dimensions. Attacking them with conventional weapons is like trying to hit a shadow with a stick. In-ho gestured for the delegation to be seated around a conference table that materialized from the floor. The furniture adjusted itself to each being's anatomy automatically. Dr. Bay is our leading expert on dimensional physics, In-ho explained. She has been studying entities like your devourers for over 20 years. We call them pests. The casual dismissal of beings that had destroyed entire fleets sent a ripple of shock through the council delegation. Vextari leaned forward urgently. You have encountered these creatures before? You know how to fight them? Fight them? Dr. Bay smiled, slightly. We manage them. They are attracted to unstable void rifts, which your failed gate project created in abundance. We have been sealing breaches and containing incursions for decades. She activated a holographic display that showed the Devourer advance from humanity's perspective. The seemingly unstoppable assault looked very different when viewed through dimensional sensors. The creatures moved in predictable patterns, following energy gradients between dimensional layers. The solution is relatively simple, Dr. Bay continued. You stabilize the quantum foam around each incursion point, then use phase shift weapons to target their dimensional anchor points. Once their connection to your reality is severed, they naturally retreat to their own universe. General Quindar stared at the display in confusion. Phase shift weapons? Dimensional anchor points? We have no understanding of such concepts. No, In-ho agreed calmly. You would not. These technologies require a complete rethinking of physics beyond the theoretical framework that the Council has been using for millennia. Vextari felt hope and desperation warring in his chest. Would you be willing to share this technology? We can offer significant compensation. Territory rights, resource concessions, full council membership with senior status for humanity. The silence that followed was profound. In-ho and Dr. Bay exchanged glances that held an entire conversation. Finally, In-ho spoke. Counselor, I appreciate the offer, but I think you misunderstand our situation. We do not need your territory. We have better worlds in adjacent dimensions. We do not need your resources. We can synthesize anything we require using dimensional manipulation. And we certainly do not need council membership. He gestured toward the windows, showing multiple star systems. Humanity has grown beyond the need for such institutions. We have treaties with species across 17 different dimensional layers. Our trade routes span realities that your sensors cannot even detect. Dr. Bay added gently, the technology you are asking for represents centuries of development beyond your current scientific understanding. Even if we gave you the blueprints, your species lack the theoretical foundation to build or maintain such systems. Vextari felt his last hope crumbling. Then you will not help us? In-ho considered the question carefully. We will consider assistance, but not restoration. The Council as it existed is finished. Your member species had the opportunity to work with humanity 34 years ago. Instead, you chose arrogance and dismissal. He stood and walked to one of the impossible windows, looking out at a star system that existed in a dimension where time moved differently. However, he continued, we are not without compassion. Any species willing to abandon the supremacist attitudes that led to this crisis will be offered sanctuary in human space, not as subjects, but as equals in a new kind of civilization. And those who refuse, asked General Quindar, will be free to seek their fortune elsewhere in the galaxy. We will clear the void spawn from your territories to protect civilian populations. But we will not restore governments that have proven themselves unfit to lead. Vextari struggled with the implications. Humanity was offering to save his people, but only by fundamentally changing everything about how galactic civilization worked. The proud hierarchies that had existed for millennia would be replaced by something entirely new. What about our history, our traditions, our cultural achievements? Dr. Bay smiled more warmly. Culture and history are treasures to be preserved. We are not asking you to abandon what makes your species unique. We are asking you to abandon the belief that age alone grants wisdom, and that some species are inherently superior to others. She activated another display showing human colonies where dozens of different species work together as equals. This is what we have built in our isolation. Not a hierarchy based on who traveled the stars first, but a partnership based on what each being can contribute. Inho returned to the table. You have 1 week to consider our offer. Broadcast the terms to your member species and let them decide for themselves. We will begin clearing the void spawn from civilian areas immediately, regardless of your decision. As the council delegation prepared to leave, Vexitari turned back to the Admiral. May I ask you something? Why did your people leave so quietly 34 years ago? No speeches, no protests, no demands for better treatment? Inho smiled, and for the first time there was genuine warmth in his expression. Because we knew something you did not. We knew we could do better on our own. The council was not holding us back out of malice. You simply could not imagine possibilities beyond your own experience. When we walked away, we were not running from something. We were walking toward something greater. And now, finally, we have become what we always had the potential to be. The shuttle bay sealed behind the departing council delegation, leaving them to carry an impossible choice back to their dying civilization. Behind them, humanity's greatest achievement continued its quiet rotation around an artificial star, proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything your critics said you could never be. Fleet Admiral Kyung-Soo Jang materialized his task force at the edge of what had once been Zeltharan space. Around him, 17 human ships phased into normal space, with the casual precision of beings who had mastered the art of dimensional travel. What they found was devastation beyond anything the Council's reports had conveyed. The void spawn had not simply destroyed the star systems, they had unraveled them. Planets existed as scattered fragments of matter that could not remember how to hold together. Stars flickered between existence and non-existence, their nuclear fires confused about which laws of physics to follow. Space itself was wounded, leaking energy into dimensions where it did not belong. "Analysis complete," reported his science officer, Commander Mireille Park. "We have 47 active void spawn clusters and approximately 300 unstable. Dimensional rifts. The damage extends across 12 parsecs." Kyung-Soo nodded grimly. This was worse than the initial incursions humanity had dealt with during their own early experiments with void manipulation. The Council's botched gate project had torn holes in reality that allowed entire broods of void spawn to enter normal space. "Begin standard containment protocol," he ordered. "Seal the rifts first, then deal with the active clusters." The human ships moved with fluid coordination that would have amazed Council observers if any had survived to watch. Each vessel activated dimensional anchors that stabilized the quantum foam around the rifts, preventing new void spawn from entering. The process looked simple, but required technology that could manipulate the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Meanwhile, President Mina Song addressed the galaxy from Nexus 7. Her words transmitted across multiple dimensional layers to reach every surviving civilization. The Galactic Council as you knew it no longer exists, she announced calmly. The governmental structure that ruled this galaxy for millennia has proven itself incapable of protecting the beings it claimed to serve. Effective immediately, the Human Federation is establishing a new order based on cooperation rather than hierarchy. Her image appeared on screens throughout the refugee camps that had sprung up in the outer systems. Millions of beings from dozens of species watched as a human, a member of the species they had dismissed as primitives, explained how their universe was about to change. Any species willing to abandon supremacist attitudes and work as equals will be welcomed into the Federation. You will be judged not by how long your species has traveled the stars, but by what you can contribute to our shared future. There will be no senior or junior members, no ancient wisdom granted by age alone. Back in the combat zone, Kyung-Soo's ships began engaging the void spawn directly. Human weapons did not fire projectiles or energy beams. They convinced the targets that they existed in different dimensional layers. Void spawn that had been untouchable to Council forces found themselves suddenly vulnerable as human reality manipulation technology forced them to occupy the same space-time coordinates as the attacking weapons. The battle was not even close to fair. Creatures that had devoured entire fleets were eliminated in minutes by weapons that attacked their fundamental existence. The void spawn tried to phase shift away from the attacks, but human technology simply followed them through the dimensional barriers they attempted to hide behind. Cluster 7 eliminated, reported Commander Park. Beginning cleanup of residual dimensional distortions. High Counselor Vexitari, watching the human assault from a refugee ship in a nearby system, felt emotions he could not name, relief that the nightmare was ending, humiliation that beings he had dismissed as children were solving problems that had destroyed his civilization, and a growing understanding of just how badly the Council had misjudged humanity. The human ships worked with mechanical efficiency, sealing rifts and eliminating void spawn with techniques that made the impossible look routine. In 6 hours, they accomplished what the Council's greatest fleets had failed to do in months of desperate fighting. President Song's broadcast continued, outlining the new reality that was emerging from the ashes of the old order. The technologies we will share are not weapons of conquest, but tools of creation. Dimensional manipulation allows us to build worlds where none existed before. Reality anchoring lets us create perfect environments for any species. Phase shifting. Transportation opens up infinite possibilities for exploration and settlement. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. But these gifts come with responsibility. Species that join the Federation must abandon the belief that might makes right, or that age grants automatic authority. We are building something new, a civilization where every being has the opportunity to reach their full potential. Some species embraced the offer immediately. The Corvins, their military pride broken by the void spawn assault, formally requested Federation membership within hours. Younger species that had been marginalized by the Council saw an opportunity for true equality. Others refused. The surviving Zeltharan leadership, still clinging to notions of inherent superiority, announced their intention to rebuild their empire in distant star clusters. They departed with whatever ships they could salvage, their destination unknown. Admiral Kyung-Soo received reports from across the former Council space as human forces completed their cleanup operations. The void spawn threat was ended, the rifts sealed, and reality stabilized. But the real work was just beginning. "Sir," called Commander Park from her station, We're receiving a priority message from Federation Command. President Song is requesting a full assessment of infrastructure requirements for refugee integration. Kyung-soo smiled. The transition from military commander to humanitarian coordinator was one that human officers made easily. Another advantage of a culture that valued adaptability over rigid hierarchy. Tell the president we will need approximately 40 new orbital habitats and 60 terraforming teams, he replied. The refugee populations are larger than initially estimated, but well within our capacity to accommodate. Years later, Vexitari would serve as an administrator on New Harmony, one of the first integrated worlds where human and non-human children learned together in schools that taught physics beyond anything the old council had imagined. He would watch young beings from a dozen species collaborate on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The irony was not lost on him. Humanity had offered this same partnership 34 years ago, when they were still willing to work within the Council's framework. The Council's arrogance had not just cost them humanity's aid, it had cost them the chance to grow beyond their own limitations. Now humanity led a federation that spanned multiple dimensions, where species worked together as equals rather than competing for dominance. The technologies they shared freely had opened up infinite new frontiers for exploration and settlement. The old Council archives were preserved in Federation libraries, maintained as a reminder of what could happen when wisdom was confused with age and when potential was dismissed based on preconceptions. The last entry in those archives was a simple application. Request for admission to the Human Federation approved. But the real memorial to the Council's failure was not found in any archive. It was visible every day in the integrated communities, where beings worked together without regard for which species had been senior or junior in the old hierarchy. Children played games that involved folding space around themselves, casually manipulating forces that had once been considered impossible. Humanity had kept their promise. They had walked away without speaking when words proved useless. Their return, when it came, spoke louder than any argument they could have made in that council chamber decades before. The galaxy belonged to the Federation now, not through conquest, but through competence. They had inherited a universe full of broken species and wounded civilizations, and had the patience and wisdom to help them heal. In the end, the Council's apology had indeed come in ruins, not the ruins of defeat, but the ruins of an old order that had outlived its usefulness. From those ruins, something better had grown, something that honored the potential in every being, regardless of how long their species had been reaching for the stars. The greatest revenge, it turned out, was not destruction. It was creation. It was building something so obviously superior that even former enemies wanted to be part of it, and humanity, with characteristic, quiet competence, had done exactly that.